Welcome everyone to this session. I'm Dr. Jeremy Reed. I'm an assistant professor of English at Westminster, and I'm really happy you're all here. We have a really great presentation for you in this breakout session from Westminster alumna Noelia Cerna. I want to tell you just a few things really quickly. This session is co-hosted by JANUS, which is Westminster's literary magazine. JANUS publishes student fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and visual art every spring, and they're really excited to be able to host a creative writer as part of the Hancock Symposium today. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to, the Literature Club on campus as well, which also supports writing, reading, and the literary arts on campus. And they've been a great support as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Noelia so that she can start her talk, The Power of Owning Our Story. Noelia Cerna is a Latina poet based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. She was born in Costa Rica and immigrated to the United States at the age of 7 and received a bachelor's degree in English from Westminster College in Missouri. Her poems have been published in audio form in Tourist Journal, The Revolution, Relaunch, The North Meridian Review, and the Plants and Poetry Journal. She holds a lot of positions. We're really lucky to have her here. Noelia is the program coordinator for the Creative Arkansas Community Hub and Exchange, a crisis intervention counselor with the Arkansas Crisis Center and the Crisis Text Line, a reader and poetry feedback editor for Tinderbox Poetry Journal, an assistant poetry editor for Borderlands Texas Poetry Review, an associate editor for Sibling Rivalry Press, an editor for Nomadic Press, writing mentor for PEN America's Prison Writing Mentorship Program, and a recent recipient of the PEN America Lingo Ramen Prize for Mentorship. The board president and director of the Ozark Poets and Writers Collective, a writer for Powerful Latinas Writing, and a community partner and event curator for the Plants and Poetry Journal. Please help me in welcoming Noelia Cerna.
Taco Tuesday has been canceled. We, the brown people, are fed up, so we are no longer feeding y'all. Effective immediately, we are packing up the burritos, enchiladas, chips and salsa, fajitas, pico de gallo, guacamole, tortillas, chimichangas, arroz con frijoles, tamales, empanadas, hot sauce, jalapenos, tres leches, just became no leches for you. We'll take the cute Mexican sweetbread with the pink and the yellow powder topping, and the Cubans are coming too, the people and the sandwiches. So there go your plátanos, ropa vieja, and forget about Brazilian steakhouses. We are closing the Mexican food restaurants, the taco stands, and taking all the little old ladies making pupusas with us. We're taking the horchata, the huevos rancheros, and all our fun little swear words, yep. And if losing all of that isn't enough, we're taking the Corona and Dos Equis too, because Spanish. We'll take the mojitos, we'll take the margaritas, because that's my cousin's name. Please and thank you. You can keep the mariachis though, but we're taking Beyonce because she was fire on mi gente, which means we'll have to take Jay-Z too. We're taking Despacito, however, not Justin Bieber, because reasons. We're taking A Donde Está la Biblioteca, because that's all you people could ever learn to say anyways. We'll also be taking Hasta la Vista. And while you mourn our food, beer, and swear words, all those fun things to try on and proclaim to love because they're just so authentic, we'll take the janitors, construction workers, field workers, plant workers, washers, seamstresses, maids, and anyone else you have seen as nothing more than a back to set your foundations on, because it's fun to experience the things we bring while spitting on the hands that brought them. We will not fertilize your crops with these beautiful brown bodies anymore. You will be left to rebuild and clean and cook and gather and do all those tasks you found to be beneath you alone. We will take our spice, our flavor, our rhythm, our music, our history, our wisdom, our vibrant lifestyle, and leave you to figure out your identity without our culture. And then we'll take back our children. Because even in the sorrow of our dangerous and crumbling countries, even in the midst of poverty and hunger and murder, they will at least sleep in our arms, the only place children should ever sleep. And to anyone who believes these tiny brown babies deserve to be caged like animals, we say, you can make your own darn burritos. Hi, I'm Noelia. I want to first thank Dr. Reed for introducing me, and I have to say that hearing my own bio being read out loud, even though I wrote it and sent it in myself, never gets any less strange and always has me thinking that's super long and official sounding. It's starting to read more like a resume at this point, and I should probably just get a LinkedIn like everybody else. I'm putting that on my list of things to do immediately following this presentation. So I am many things and hold many roles, as you have all been made painfully aware of. But what I am first and foremost is a poet. I want to talk to you all about my life as a writer and as a performance poet after my Westminster education and graduation, to tell you how I went from writing the poetry that I published in JANUS at Westminster, which was not that great, but A for effort, to performing poetry at local universities, high schools, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, and everything in between. I also want to share some more of my work with you. But before I get into all of that, I want to acknowledge that by living, working, and creating in Northwest Arkansas, that I occupy the ancestral homelands of the Caddo, the Osage, and the Quapaw peoples, who acted as stewards and maintained an enduring relationship to the land. By all accounts, my journey to where I am today began and continued with what I once used to see as failures. My final year at Westminster culminated in the completion of my senior thesis project, which ended up winning the Creative Award at the Westminster Spring Undergraduate Scholars Forum. However, after my graduation, I returned to my home state with 8 rejection letters from various graduate school programs, while almost all, if not all, of my English major classmates were preparing to begin their studies to pursue various graduate degrees. I was driving home with a bachelor's and nothing to show for it, apart from the many books I had purchased for my English classes over my 4 years and didn't have the heart to part with. Plus, they probably wouldn't have been much to resell at the campus bookstore anyways, let's be perfectly honest. After researching local readings held in my area, I found one reading at a bookshop called Nightbird Books that was held by the Ozark Poets and Writers Collective once a month on the last Tuesday of every month. I wrote the date down in my planner, and when the day arrived, I sat down and I watched a group of local slam poets perform their work. They had just returned from the national competition. At the time, I remember thinking that I could never be a slam poet. I was not that brave. I began attending these meetings monthly, even though it took several months before I ever shared any of my work or even worked up the courage to introduce myself to anybody. I had allowed my graduate school rejections to make me believe I was no longer a poet and therefore did not belong in certain spaces. During this time, my English degree landed me my first professional job, teaching all subjects in a multi-level 1st through 4th grade classroom for 2 years. It took me into working as an application verification specialist with the health insurance marketplace. That was a fun job. As a manager at Pier 1 Imports, and then later into a 5th through 8th grade teaching position at a local charter school. It was at this time, in the middle of my 2nd year of teaching, that I lost both my job and my first marriage simultaneously. Honestly, this is where my actual story begins. During this entire time, I had not written a single poem. Something about losing everything made me remember. My college experience was not the easiest. I experienced a trauma at the time that I would not wish on anyone. The thing that got me through that was my writing and the English faculty that provided such a warm and caring environment for a student that desperately needed that sense of safety and belonging. It was at this time after the divorce papers were filed and I was officially on unemployment for the first time in my life, that I wrote my first poem since college. A week later, I went back to the reading at Nightbird Books. One of the slam poets from that very first show was seated in the row ahead of me, and I decided to introduce myself. It turned out that he ran a local slam on the last Saturday of every month and invited me to come to the show that month. I attended my first slam at his show a week after that meeting. I went home that night and wrote my very first slam piece. It was closely followed by my second. The following month, these poems would be what won me my very first slam. I would like to share both of these pieces with you now. This first poem is called Advice to My College Self. 1. Don't pierce your belly button. It looks cute right now that you're thin, but your first adult job will be teaching first graders. They will be tall enough to reach your waist and like to grab at things too. Do not drink that entire cooler of sangria. You will never feel more sick in your life, and moving will feel like running through an earthquake. 3. Study. Don't put off your finals to go on the date. The hot guy in entomology class is not that interesting, and you will find out that he has the personality of a sponge at the next frat party. 4. Learn to keep a toothbrush and your textbook somewhere else because your roommate will lock you out a lot. 5. It's okay to send yourself carnations on Valentine's Day when you're single. Just don't forget that they're from you, because it's okay to love yourself. You don't need somebody else for that. 6. Double major. It is perfectly rational to study both poetry and biology. Own your own intelligence, because you are the only one that knows what you're capable of accomplishing. 7. That frat boy will hurt you, and it will be okay. Because 7 years later, you'll be able to tell that desperate girl in the crisis text line whose boyfriend just hurt her that this is not the end. When she stands on the edge of her dormitory roof, you'll be able to say, I have been where you are. This is just the beginning. Trust me, I have survived to make poetry out of my scars. 8. You are not made from the rocks people throw at you. You are simply made stronger by them because you survived and can walk with your head held high. 9. When they call you a spick, tell them that your Costa Rican heritage finds it beneath itself to answer to bigots simply because they can't handle the merengue in your step. The way your hips whip to the salsa heartbeat that is still going strong. They are frightened by the smell of the sea in your hair, the tropical sun in your eyes. It's not your fault that they are foreign to your kind of beautiful. 10. Your parents will be disappointed, but you will still be amazing. You don't have to sandcastle yourself into their dreams because no one can love sand. Life will continue its ebb and flow, so be the rock beneath your own dreams and build your empire as you see fit, because every castle deserves a queen, and you, my love, are royalty. The second poem has a much longer title, but its shortened title is Bathsheba. The day I finally let myself wonder what was so special about the woman my ex-husband left me for and then married, or the day I finally asked myself what was so wrong with me, or the day I found out my ex-husband and his wife were pregnant and then lost their baby. I remember you, Bathsheba. How the baby in your womb became a sacrifice for a smitten God to teach David the depth of his sin. How your forbidden lover begged for mercy, humbled himself before the Lord to pray for his newborn son. How an innocent baby paid the price for 2 adults. How after 7 days of illness, the baby dies. I remember how my Bible was taught to me as a child, how some would say this was a punishment, retribution. My ex-husband tells me he's sorry. He tells me this is payment for everything he did after 3 affairs, leaving me for the 3rd woman. He says this is God's punishment, and I hate myself for even remembering you or David. I wonder how long my ex-husband prayed, or if he even had time to pray, even felt the need to pray, if like David, he refused to eat or sleep for 7 days, if like David, he begged in sackcloth, laying on the floor before a wronged God. I realize in this moment that I never asked what you did during those 7 days. Did you beg too? Did you weep before God? Or did you spend every moment letting your child feel the warmth and comfort of your skin, showing your little one the kind of love only a mother can show, making your child's final moments as comfortable and peaceful as possible? How much did you suffer, Bathsheba? Your husband killed in battle at King David's command, your child dead because of King David's sin. Did you cry? Did you feel anger? Did you hate David, God, yourself? Can I ask you if you even loved King David? Did you miss your husband like you? I too have lost worlds at the hands of man. I find myself driving on this highway alone in the dark, wanting desperately to speak to you, maybe because you understand what it's like to lose everything, only to have your final moments with your child erased from history. The scene you were a main character in, written to champion the grieving man, silencing your loss. I understand, as you did then, that these moments are the only ones where our pain is allowed on stage. The only time our grief matters is if a man experiences it too. So tell me, Bathsheba, tell me everything you couldn't say, everything they didn't write, everything we don't know. I'm listening. I too have known anger. I too have known pain. I am here, and so are you, and our stories matter, even if only to each other. So Bathsheba, please, tell me your story. However long it takes, I can wait, while there's still highway and night left, and not a man around to silence us. My first slam was one of the most important moments of my life. It brought me back to the core of who I was. But it wasn't until I landed my job as a proofreader at Walmart Corporate that everything would come clearly into focus. The important part about this new job was not the job title, although it did come with a paycheck and with benefits that I had only ever dreamed about. It was because of someone that I met in the bathroom on my second day at work, who reminded me of who I was and where I come from. These next 2 poems I would like to share with you were written during that time in the corporate world. The first is called Janitor, and the second poem is called Brown. And they both kind of speak to each other about the same experience as a woman of color in the corporate world. And I would like to dedicate this first poem to Maria and to all of the migrant men, women, and children that have lost their lives in ICE detention or at our borders. This is Janitor. It was my second day on the job at Walmart Corporate. By far the most prestigious position this brown girl had ever been in, and the pressure of the production floor, of the perfectly polished people who might see the weakness hiding behind my trembling bottom lip, forced me to the far stall of the restroom to pull myself together somewhere safe from their vindictive gaze. This is where I met Maria. Walking out of the stall, still tearful and shaking, I spotted her kneeling beside the sink, her wrinkled hands wringing out the mop head, the white suds running down her brown fingertips. She smiled warmly and said, "Hola." I took a deep breath and responded in my mother tongue, trying bravely to smile back. I stared into the mirror, smoothed out the silk blouse spot specifically for this job, then heard her say, "Tus padres deben de estar muy orgullosos de ti." And for a moment, her words were the salty Alajuela breeze I used to breathe in back home. I smiled, thanked her. My parents are proud of this job. I began planning my bathroom breaks for 10 and 3 every day when I knew I would find her there. She'd ask me if the computers were still being difficult, and I would ask her if her daughter had gotten out of her rude biology professor's class, and we'd struggle to stay straight-faced as the tight-laced white folks passed by, nodding their greetings to me while turning their faces away to ignore Maria. It wasn't until my 3rd week that I noticed it wasn't just the gringos whose eyes would roll at her, but the Latinas too. Their expensive heels clicking on the freshly mopped tile, eyes locked on the mirror so they could ignore their parents' reflection in her aging, hunched frame, a reminder of what we might have been, and she keeps her eyes fixed to the floor on the filth their souls leave behind. The day one of the Latinas throws a wadded paper towel down and says, "That's what janitors are for." I ask Maria where home is. She tells me she moved here 4 years ago from Guadalajara, hoping to start a bakery, making pink and yellow frosted Mexican bread. But the bank is a border wall of words and paperwork that she doesn't have the language to scale, so she silently kneels and cleans the fading tile. Maria knows her place, and she reminds me of my father, how his master's degree became worthless the day he stepped foot on this American dream soil, his education wasted as he waded in the blood on a chicken plant killing floor. And I remember how I promised myself I would never stain my hands cleaning floors so others could build their success on my back. So I used my American college education to bleach the Costa Rica out, sterilized my island-soiled accent for that interview at an ideal job, steamed the North Pacific waves of my hair flat for that exceeds expectations job review. Now I think about how brown bodies like Maria's are the steps I have climbed to become a disaster tourist in this bathroom that she will never be able to leave. Maria is throwing trash bags into her cart when she sees me leaving, surrounded by my white coworkers. Her eyes meet mine, and for a split second, I hesitate, knowing if I nod or smile or speak in her direction, the brown of my skin will show through, and the culture that I have tried so hard to dress up, press down, and clean out will come tumbling out. Maria remains silent and unsmiling, waiting for acknowledgement, for permission to speak. But I walk past her, looking down at my hands, suddenly feeling dirtier than the tiles I will never have to clean. The second poem was written in response to the first, a little bit later. This one is called Brown. It happens when she enters the van. Typical soccer mom van, suburban staple. Her white boss is driving while she and 3 white coworkers discuss the day. As the conversation ebbs and flows, she sits looking out the window, watching the city roll by, suddenly aware she's the only brown girl in this space. It is not a feeling of fear that fills her chest, but one of sadness. Suddenly, longing to look back and catch a flash of brown or black skin amongst the sea of white. She walks past the storefronts, trailing her party, an island locked in the central US. The door to the restaurant opens and the beat of the Latino music wafts out with the smells of meat and cooking onions. Spanish words surround her and she steps into this home. The cooks are all brown. They turn the carne on the fire as they dance to the music and laugh. It is loud and warm and smells like a fritanga. Brightly colored banners hang in rows, spreading across the ceiling, the colors warm and inviting. They remind her of the open-air markets where the brightly colored shirts hang throughout tents and the smell of cooking meat wafts between the aisles as the street vendors call out to the passers-by to enter their stores, calling them queen, sweetheart, princess, corazón. Wicker lanterns are spaced across the ceiling, mingling with the banners. They sway with the breeze, casting shadows below, twinkling in the dark room like a mother's prayer in the night as two parents prepare themselves to bring two little girls to the promised land, hoping they won't forget the history in their skin. Laughing with her white coworkers, the brown girl bites into her carne asada street tacos, letting the flavor fill her mouth, while Narciso Yepes plays romance, wafts through her mind, reminding her of a time she was a little girl, and her father would serenade her with his Spanish guitar, and her curly hair was beautiful, and her brown skin was beautiful, and she remembers what it feels like to be proud of who she is, so she rides back to the office, looking out the window, smiling when she reaches her desk, pulls the scrunchie out of her hair, fluffs it into a frizzy mass of curls, lets it hang loose around her shoulders, puts her headphones in, ends the day with Narciso, with wild hair, brilliant smile, looking like the little girl her parents raised. The first poem that I shared, called Janitor, came from a very vulnerable, honest, and ugly place. It forced me to examine myself, my privilege, and my own views and values. We cannot evolve until we are ready to look at the parts of us that we do not like. It is in this examination that we discover our purpose. I had spent so much time denying my journey as an immigrant. Ironically, this was what my entire thesis project was based on during my senior year at Westminster. Somewhere between the first and the 8th rejection letter, I forgot that journey that my writing took, and it set my writing off for years. It has taken me until this year, almost 5 years into the slam scene, to find my voice. Up until this year, I saw myself as someone that had no purpose and no career. I saw myself as someone with failure after failure. I now work for an organization as a community liaison, providing funding and soliciting work from the local artists in the Northwest Arkansas area. I get to fund and commission works of art, music, poetry, and everything in between. I have now performed my work at arts festivals at the University of Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas Community College, Crystal Bridges, and have countless interviews and articles that have been published. I hold multiple editorships and am now the sitting board president of the same organization that held the readings I first attended when I came home from college. The slam community introduced me to the person that has not only become a dear friend, but is also a fellow slam poet who introduced me to the prison industrial complex. That introduction led me into my mentorship work with PEN America and with Decarcerate. I am now 2 months into my editorships with Nomadic Press and am working on editing a full-length manuscript with a slam poetry legend who now teaches university-level English in California. I have a deep understanding of the publishing world because of the editorships that I hold, and I understand that it isn't just about publishing a book, but it's also about the press that carries that manuscript into the world, and that matters too. I used to believe that when plans went awry, that it meant I had failed. The beauty in all of this is that it is when life takes us into the weeds and far away from the path we thought we were meant to take that we begin to understand our own unique path. I used to believe that the jobs that were not for me were simply placeholders, ways to make time go by with no real rhyme or reason. I failed to see that I was becoming what I needed to be while learning the job skills that would lead me to the job that I hold now, job skills that were vital to my professional development. Every single thing that went wrong and that ended up not working out led me to the places and to the people that I needed to meet and know. I am learning in my 30s to look at my failures with excitement because I know what's on the other side. I understand now that every U-turn and every fork in the road is leading me away from things that are not for me. Sometimes I want to do things and be someone because that's what everyone else around me is doing. You do not have to succeed in traditional ways. We are living in a COVID world where every plan we made is now flipped on its head. All of our worlds have been changed since March. Many of us never imagined we would be living in a virtual world. Many of us didn't even know what Zoom was before now. But there is a beauty in the unknown and in uncertainty. We are collectively beginning to understand the importance of our homes, of our families, and of our core groups. Many of us are realizing the jobs we thought should consume our whole lives don't hold that power anymore. We are experiencing a collective shift in perspective and in priorities. This is what changes of plans, what disasters and what failures do. They simply help us differentiate the things that matter from the things that don't, if we allow them to teach us. I am learning that my writing is more valuable than any degree or any publication that I might have. It is a way for me to connect to the people around me and to be a part of my community. It has connected me with people that have entrusted me with their stories and with the ways that they relate to the things that I write about. I want to share another poem that I wrote. It's the end of a chapbook that I'm currently working on that has not been published yet. But it is called Walking Our PTSD. The puppy is afraid of the trash truck, the way it clangs metal against the darkness of the early morning. He is afraid of the electric box, disguised to look like a rock, the one that marks the halfway point of our walk down our street. He is afraid of recycling bin lids, disabled dachshunds, and that one friendly dog that wags his tail and barks a greeting to us from his backyard. I feel him pull against his leash to cower behind my legs, but never lose my temper. Instead, I kneel down and blow kisses when he whimpers, hug him when he quivers. I too know what it is like to be afraid of things no one else can see. Sometimes, trash trucks can look like monsters in the dark. Sometimes, fake rocks can hide dangers only I can sense. Sometimes, recycling bin lids can be holes in the sidewalk. I call him sweetheart and kiss his muzzle, knowing I am afraid of the sound of keys and closing doors. Knowing, like him, I am afraid of life's normalities, how I always wonder when someone tells me they are going to the store, how many times it will take before they don't come back anymore. The puppy is not the only one that spends his days staring out of windows, looking for the car that holds the one he loves to return. My recycling bin lids are the extended silences of a phone that does not ring. My fake rocks, the temporary goodbyes that feel like forever. And my trash trucks, the emptiness of cold sheets on the other side of the bed when I wake up alone in the middle of the night. I know what it is like to hear bombs lurking beneath the singing of birds, what it is like to hear the helicopters and blaring sirens despite the peacefulness of a normal Wednesday night. I kiss the puppy, tug gently on his leash, and tell him he's coming home with me. I tell him I love him and that I'm right here. I tell him we are going home, that he is loved. And sometimes I wonder if I am reassuring myself or him that someday somebody will see the fear and instead of running will tell me we are going home, that they see the trauma but are here to swim against the only stream I have ever known. So we walk. His tail begins to wag, thumping against my leg. I blink back tears as he gratefully leans against me, and I wish for a reassuring love like mine for him. We walk past that fake rock, and the puppy walks past with his head held high, a sign that even the deepest fears can be soothed. In the time left, we wanted to leave some time at the end for any questions, but I wanted to share one final poem with all of you. And then, as I mentioned, leave time for questions. Anything regarding my writing, editing, or professional work. I want to thank you for holding this space with me. And I want to thank Westminster College for inviting me to share with you. I especially want to thank the college professors that are in this Zoom room for helping to shape me into the woman, professional, and writer that I am today. You know who you are. I want to end with this newest poem. It was commissioned for a collaborative project with the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art and will be part of a showcase with local talent to be streamed on a global platform before the end of this year. I want to encourage you all to cherish every step of your journey, wherever it may take you, especially to cherish the times when that path goes off the map, because these are truly the moments and the steps that matter. This last poem is Love Letter to the Immigrant. Yes, you, the one holding fragments of an evaporating language beneath your tongue, crossing oceans so your children could break barriers instead of soil. To the mother, tucking pieces of her native tongue into her children's backpacks. To the father, trading master's degrees for chicken plants. To the children, entering classrooms in a country that does not like natural hair, curls, or color. They will call you ugly. Try to wrap your identity within a slur, build cages around you, call you illegal, make fun of your accent and skin color. Remember, when they try to break you, how your ancestors carried the same skin tone, how you are still beautiful. Do not let them steal the language from your throat. They will try to convince you that tongues cannot carry two languages. Remember, your accents are landmarks, reminders of the homes left behind. Remember, every piece of identity you keep is a connection to home and to those that came before. Remember that seeds do not concern themselves with where they've been planted. They simply take root and bloom. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Noelia. As the only one with the mic on, I'll applaud you. That was amazing. Thank you so much. I will just say to everyone, please put your questions in the chat box. If you are still learning how Zoom works, there's a button for it on the outer edge of your Zoom window. Go ahead and click that and type your question in and I can read them out for everyone. Wow, that was just really great. So I wanna maybe give you a question to start while we wait and see what everyone wants to talk about.
Sure.
I really loved the sense of the importance of community and mentorship that you focused on in your talk. This line from the poem about Bathsheba stuck out to me, where you said, our stories matter even if only to each other. And I was just really struck by that moment. And I wondered, you were talking about how you'd felt this sense of failure repeatedly. And then now that you've found the kinds of communities that are valuable and helpful and supportive of you, that you feel like you are kind of like standing in a place in a different kind of way. And so I wondered how you might have seen that informing your writing over the last year as you've found your way into those groups. Have you noticed any kind of shift, or if not, what are the things that have stuck with you?
So I actually, when I was preparing for this, I dug out all of my old JANUS books. And I was looking at my writing that I had published there. And honestly, I had not read my writing from college in over 10 years. And I can see in my writing, not only that I progressed into my own voice, but that I leaned more into those communities. I was more, I guess you could say I was more honest about myself and my experiences. If you look at my early writing, it's very ethereal and symbolic, and I honestly don't know what on earth I was talking about in half of those poems. I think a lot of writers in the room can relate to that. Looking at old poems can be a little cringy, but now it's that brutal honesty about life and the world and not being afraid to speak on that. I believe my poetry has become more brave.
Thanks. We've got a couple questions. So Carolyn Sterner asks, did you know you wanted to write, or did it come to you in time? How did you know?
I have been writing from the time I could speak. My mother was a writer, and I had a beautiful teacher in the 8th grade who introduced, I talk about this a lot, she introduced an emergency poetry unit after a friend of ours lost their life suddenly, which is a hard thing to explain to 8th grade students. And for a way of us to cope, she had us write poetry. And at that moment in the 8th grade, I thought, this is what I'm meant to do. So I think in a way, I always did know that I wanted to write. But it was at that moment that I started really pursuing that. And it has only become more of a confirmation the further along that I get.
The next one is from Carolyn Perry. And so Carolyn, there she is, says, it's so great to see you, Noelia. As you know, I love your poetry about home, your memories of Costa Rica. How do you think about those early poems? And do you ever find yourself going back to writing about Costa Rica since then?
So I have revisited the thesis project that I worked on with Professor Zaid. Hi, by the way, Professor Zaid, I love you. And I love you, Dr. Perry. I hold those poems very dear. It took me a long time, honestly, to go back and visit that manuscript. I think in a way, I sort of thought that I have the graduation card that Professor Zaid gave me the year that I left. And there was a line in there that said that the work that I had done was transformational. And it's true, because it got me really looking into my roots as a woman of color, as an immigrant. And when I got all of those rejection letters, I think I kind of thought that maybe it was a mistake to delve into that identity. And so I stopped writing about it for years. It's only been in the past 3 years that I have written anything about being an immigrant. And so revisiting those old poems where I had so much confidence in who I was has been reaffirming, because I knew what I was talking about then, if I had just listened to myself and trusted myself. Success is more than just a degree. It's not being afraid to be who you are authentically. So I hold those dear, and yes, I write more about Costa Rica now than I ever have before. I have a whole set of poems that my peers lovingly call my angry brown girl poems. So yes, I write about that a lot, actually.
The next question comes from Marissa Urtubise. Hi, Marissa. She's a student of mine. So she says, how did you get over the fear that you first held about being an immigrant and Latina woman?
You know, I have been blessed with very powerful women of color in my life. The poem that I read about Maria, she taught me so much about what it meant to be an immigrant. I clearly remember my first day at Walmart Corporate. I walked in and there was this line of people, the janitorial staff. And I remember thinking, every single one of these people on this janitorial staff are Latino. And there was that gut-wrenching feeling of, what am I doing in this position when so many of them are here? And getting to know Maria and having her even speak to me in Spanish was transformational for me, because it reminded me of who I was. I spent so much time trying to be somebody that I'm not, because I thought that it would get me somewhere. It would make people accept me or take me seriously. And I appreciate now speaking my truth and being authentic with people the way that I'm able to connect with, going back to your previous point, Dr. Reed, community. You can't really be a part of a community until you understand who you are within that community. So the sooner you are able to latch onto that, don't be afraid. My hope for people is that they learn that sooner than I did.
That's such a great answer. So the next question is from Colette Fayetteville, who says, you spoke about how it took you a long time to find your voice in your poetry. What advice would you give emerging writers who are still trying to find their voice or identity?
Read a lot. Reach out to poets that you admire. A lot of my finding my voice came from connecting with other writers, other people in the writing community. And we are all more than happy to mentor, to talk to people. Surround yourself with your craft. The more that you know about writing styles, about topics, the better equipped you are to find what works for you. I know I read extensively. I reached out to a lot of poets and asked them their advice about their process, attend workshops. It's mostly just building a network within the writing community. Relationships are crucial when it comes to that. So reach out, read, just dive in.
This next one comes from Marissa again. And this time, this is a great question. So she asks, how did you gain the courage to share your writing in a competitive format?
So this is actually kind of a funny story. That first slam, what I didn't mention in my talk was the reason that I ended up on stage was because the friend that I took with me to that slam literally pushed me onto the stage. I was sitting in the audience thinking, oh, I can't do this. I'm not like these other poets. I used to think that being a slam poet meant you were loud and angry and you took up all this space. And this friend of mine literally took it upon themselves to force me into this position that I didn't think I was ready for. This goes back to surrounding yourself with that network of people. A lot of times the things that have made me grow, I have been exposed to because somebody in my network that I care about pushed me into that. And from then on, you just keep practicing. Never write yourself out of spaces. Never tell yourself that you do not belong there. As long as you are writing, as you are practicing the form, you belong and you have a vital story. Everybody's story is important, so do not write yourself out of spaces.
This next one comes from Carolyn Sterner. And Carolyn says, how would one move forward with this question of who you are, and to find who you may be if you don't know who you are? You kind of started to talk about that. I think it's in response to what you were saying before. But if you don't have an idea of who you are, like, how do you start?
Honestly, it's, for me, my thesis came from looking at my family, the people that I grew up with, the memories that I had of when I was little, the things that mattered to me. You inform yourself a lot by looking back at where you've come from. The little things that make you who you are, the hobbies, the passions that you have, the things that make you light up when you talk about them. Really latch on to that, examine that, ask people that you care about, things that they think make you unique. You learn a lot about what people admire in you. And also trying to build that community around you. You tend to find yourself more when you have a place to belong, because it gives you that security to bloom. So looking for people that you think would be safe and enriching to your life. Just live your life and truly examine it, I guess would be my best advice.
Yeah, that's great. And that's great advice for writing too, where you find the people you're in conversation with and you want to be in conversation with, and that you find those specific details that make you the poet you are. Like in your poem where the person gets in the van and that moment when she bites into the carne asada taco, right? Like it's such a like well-described moment. So this next one is from Isaac Herod, who asks, have you ever considered finding someone to write music to go behind your poems to make them into spoken word songs, a different kind of performance piece?
I have. I once worked in collaboration with an artist who did, I guess they did like a live painting behind me as I read. That's another good for anybody that has questions about how to develop their writing. Also, collaborating with other fields in the creative world. You never know, you might find some strange niche that no one else has found, and just kind of experimenting. But yes, I have considered that. I have actually written songs in the past, but
This next one is from Marissa, who asks, how did you find a community in which they accepted you fully without having to pretend?
I started volunteering. So I talked briefly about my time in the crisis line, but the reason that I started working with the crisis center was that I was a caller to the local crisis center. And I decided that with as much as they helped me, that crisis line, and I don't say this lightly, it saved my life. It's part of the reason that I am here. And I thought, you know what? I need to give back what has been given to me. And so volunteering alongside other people that cared about the things that I cared about, and also finding other people that were not afraid of who they were. I cannot stress enough, particularly for any college students that are in this Zoom room, how important it is to be authentically who you are. I wish I could explain how fearful I was of who I was when I was in that stage in my life. I was far more quiet and accepting of things that I should never have tolerated. Cultivating self-compassion and self-love, learning to appreciate yourself and the things that make you unique, and not spending so much time trying to fit in. Fitting in is overrated. Being unique is honestly the best thing. Being you is a gift. So I think really embracing who you are begins to attract other people that are also like you and that will encourage you. I find that I connect more with people now because I am myself and I'm not afraid to be that. So really digging down into who you are as a person and learning to love that. You will find your people that way. I can promise you that.
We've got a comment from Dean, another one of my students, who says how much of an inspiration you were today. He couldn't help but play on piano while he was listening to you talk because he felt your voice was so musical. So thanks, Dean, for that comment.
That's so great.
I think we've reached the end of the questions. I've got one more maybe to end us out, but I really appreciated this focus that you had on the moments we end up in the weeds, and both how they're really difficult moments, but that sometimes, maybe not always, but sometimes they are also places of unexpected growth. And so I wanted to just ask you the question, and it's a little, I feel a little funny asking because you've already given us so much wisdom and advice and whatever.
Let's
but
do it.
What's the best advice that you've received that was helpful to you that you would want to pass on to everybody here?
Oh, wow. I think the best advice that I have ever gotten is, and it's more something my dad said to me during my first divorce. It's something that has stuck with me. He said that I would be everything that I am with or without everything around me. That can be applied to professions, degrees, to friend groups. You are enough just as you are. And it sounds kitschy and it sounds almost childish, but understanding how valuable you are just on your own makes it easier to accept those moments where you lose things and you lose people, because you understand that you're enough, period.
Thanks, Noelia. A couple last minute notes. So Carolyn left a comment, Perry, to say that Professor Zaid sends his love, thoroughly enjoyed your reading, but had to drop out before it was quite over. They both really appreciate your staying in touch and look forward to your book. And then Carolyn, it looks like there's a question here, which we might not have time for, but if you have a quick response to. Carolyn Sterner asks, is there a point when sharing your life with others is too much sharing, or can it ever be enough? And kind of with that, also this question of if sharing is how you might be able to find yourself. And I think you were kind of talking about that earlier, but.
I mean, I'm Latina, so for us, there's really no such thing as oversharing. I think that people are afraid to do that these days, whether it's we're supposed to be a certain way in public, but I think you connect better with people and with yourself if you share. The only thing that is oversharing is things that you are uncomfortable with sharing. So I think using yourself as that marker and not people around you. Trust yourself. You know exactly what you need.
And so many great moments today. Thank you so much. Trust yourself, know you are enough, allow our stories to teach us. I've got all of these things that you were talking about in my mind. I want to tell everyone to not forget that there's one more panel later tonight at 6:15 on the live stream, the Values and Visions panel with the people from the National Churchill Museum and the George Washington Carver Building. And so don't forget that that's then. But thanks so much for tuning in. And thanks, Noelia, for being with us. It was great to have you all here.